All right, so yeah. This story is about a thing that I think happens to a lot of people and a lot of projects. And I'm kind of in a bit of a unique position, not super unique, but somewhat unique, in that I can talk about it, and I was there for the whole thing. A lot of us come into projects after they've gone to hell, and we curse the person who left us this maintenance nightmare. Some of us start off on greenfield projects, and then we leave after a few years, and someone curses our name. I got to be both of those on the same project, and I can talk about it. So, because as we know, Wikipedia is the source of all truth, in case you didn't know what Bitrot meant, this is the opening paragraph from the Wikipedia article, and suffice it to say, it's a term for software maintenance. The software that is lack of maintenance, I should really say. So, yeah. Obviously, we should talk a little bit about who I am. So I've been working in startups for most of my career. Often I come in and do greenfields development. Sometimes I come in and deal with like a legacy project, but it's usually in small teams, small projects. And I've done a lot of them now. And a lot of different tech stacks all over the map. So I have some reasonable amount of experience of having seen things. A bunch of different products. And because of this, I have a deep-rooted cynicism due to years and years and years of being disappointed. So this was the earliest picture I could find of me. It's not actually me when this project began. It was just the closest to that I could find. Instead of a tiny cone, imagine a giant pink mohawk, and it's actually more accurate. Because I thought I was a badass. I knew everything. And so, I had done like a couple of projects, and I was pretty sure I was an expert. I had one tech stack kind of under my belt. I was pretty sure Perl could save the world. Oops. But I was filled with boundless optimism. I could solve anything with Perl. So let's talk about when this happened. In the year 2000-ish, kind of, over time. But yeah, it really started in the year 2000 when someone who I kind of knew decided to throw a conference here in Vancouver, and I forced myself onto the conference committee. And said, hey, what is this whole thing that you're doing with credit card processing? Really, manually? In the year 2000? This is crazy. We can write a registration system and a whole, everything system for this conference. It'll be great. I know how to do this. Just a word of warning. Sometimes when I get excited, I swear a lot. So if I start swearing, I'm sorry. So yeah, year 2000-ish, this was the stack that people used, and this was like the popular stack to do for things. A little LAMP stack: Linux, Apache, MySQL, Perl, maybe PHP. We made fun of the PHP people. So naturally, I knew better than that because I'm an expert. So we of course decided that we were going to do things better. Now, a lot of this has to do with my best intentions going terribly, terribly awry. And some of it was, they were really good ideas, but they were just a little bit ahead of their time. And so when I built it, everyone else went and built kind of the same thing, but better. And now I have to maintain my version. So yeah, we had these really great ideas. We're like, well, this needs to be super secure. So forget Linux, OpenBSD. And we need performance. So Apache and ModPerl. And this MySQL thing, this is a terrible database. No, we're never going to use that. No, Postgres is what we're going to choose. And in early 2000s, Postgres was a little bit of a radical choice. I know now it's not, but at the time, people thought that MySQL was definitely going to win, and Postgres was sort of like an afterthought. So yeah, so we had this that was our stack that we decided to do. And then we wanted to do containerization, what is now known as containerization. And we wanted to do it for security because that seemed like a sensible thing. And now, of course, everyone looks down on that. But we decided to do it with chroot because that was what was available to us and dropped privileges on all of our daemons. So we also really thought that version control was a really great idea. Turns out, yes, that is a really great idea. And Subversion had just started to become a thing, so we jumped on board Subversion. We knew that the frameworks and the languages and that we were relying on had not really had a lot of looking at them for security, so we decided we were going to audit all the things. And we had a guy who was a DBA in his real life, and he said, okay, yeah, so I have these opinions about how the database ought to be run with user and role level accounts and security and all of the good things. And we're like, yes, that sounds great. And we built something, it looked a lot like what would be an HSM now, if you're familiar with that, with public and private key splitting storage so that you could only write to the storage but not read from it on that machine because we wanted to be super secure. And we wanted audit logs, external audit logs, so that if somebody hacked the machine, we would be able to tell something about it. And yeah, and we had a weird user base. Our user base was very concerned about security, very concerned about privacy, and at the time that meant turning off cookies in JavaScript. So we couldn't use cookies in JavaScript, which sort of makes building like any sort of registration system and credit card processing really annoying. Oh yeah, and then this actually came a little bit later, but then we realized we had to do it. So when we went and audited all the things, it turned out everyone was doing like SSL really, really badly. So we wrote our own. Yeah, so what happened to our stack anyway? This guy kind of stopped being cool at some point. I remember when he was cool, and I thought I was going to be cool too, and then no. So of our entire stack there, OpenBSD, Apache Mod Perl, Postgres. Postgres is still a really good thing. And Mod Perl is something that like nobody really builds anything with anymore. So finding other people who are experts who want to maintain it is a little bit difficult because everyone says, so why don't we rewrite that instead? And I say, yes, we should do that. And Apache, nobody really uses Apache for performance anymore. That's crazy talk. That you use Nginx. And why do we need performance anyway? It's a registration system. There may be 1,000 people look at it in a year. So a lot of the things about our stack they seemed reasonable at the time, but they no longer make any sense. So yeah, containerization. So we, as I said, we had this sort of idea of a pseudo beginnings of the idea containerization, and it seemed like it was a really good idea because what we could do is we could essentially take all of the things, only the things that our daemon needed, we could put them in a little box, and our security stance would be really great because only those few libraries and things would be available within that little box. So there weren't a lot of tools to do this, and what it actually meant doing is taking all of the OS libraries and pairing them all the way back, running the daemon with ktrace, and seeing what breaks, and then iterating over that until the thing finally works. And the problem with that is now you're an OS maintainer, and that really sucks because you're either going to not update because it's a pain in your ass, or you spend all your time with ktrace on your weirdo operating system that nobody uses in prod anymore in your weirdo stack trying to figure out why it doesn't work now because somebody has made a dependency change in all of the things. And thankfully, like Apache doesn't actually have that many dependencies. They're fairly self-contained just because of the way the Apache project works. Mod Perl does though. Yeah, Perl's got a lot of dependencies, and tracking those down really sucks because it's a dynamic language, so like it can just pull stuff in, and you have to find it at runtime. ModSSL isn't too terrible. It's just like this weirdo little project that is super hard to follow through, so it's ugly. When we originally built this, our credit card processor thought SOAP was a really good idea, so it's not all just my fault. So we have a lot of XML dependencies too. And those are not really pleasant to track down, but at least they're mostly like text processing, so they're not the worst. And of course, we have our database drivers, which we also have to track down and figure out exactly what libraries they're using. Those weren't too terrible either, but maintaining them over time definitely took a toll. So as I said, like this is a thing that I think people who are doing containerization ought to think about. Like right now, the maintenance of your containers seems reasonable. In 20 years, imagine maintaining that same container and all of the things inside it when other people have stopped. So yeah, version control. I think a lot of people have seen this pattern and used this pattern. At the time, this was really kind of exciting and new. Now it's like, really? That's what you do? That's your clever plan? Yeah, so we'll check everything into the master SVN. And then we'll check it out onto staging, and we'll test it. And then we'll make any fixes, check it back in, check it out on prod, and run it. Yay, deployment! As I said, like right now, everyone kind of looks at that and they're like, really? That's kind of goofy. But at the time, this was replacing like editing text files on prod just cuz. So like this was like, oh yeah, no, we are really doing this whole deployment thing. Yeah, so that's what I intended to have happen. And it worked for about a year. We did this, maybe 2. And then people started making edits on staging and then just checking them in because it was a lot more convenient not to do that on your own box and just kind of like run them in staging, do that. Yeah, and then somebody lost a staging server and then didn't bring it back up. So it was super inconvenient to bring that back up, so why not just like, okay, well, we'll just make edits in prod. It'll be fine. We'll check those in. It'll be fine. At least we can do rollbacks, right? That'll be great. Somebody lost a Subversion server, and this is after I gave up the project for a while, and I came back and there was no SVN. There was no source code repository at all. It had devolved to the point where people were just making edits in prod and then just restarting the daemon. And I'm like, okay, that kind of didn't work out the way I planned. Nobody cared. And the reason why nobody cared is non-technical users hate this pattern a lot, especially when you're using it like when you should be using something else. This is what we should have been using. In my defense, CMSs as a product really didn't exist when I first started out. And I thought it was totally reasonable that everyone would just edit HTML and templates with VI and then check them in. It seemed fine. Yeah, you should totally just use someone else to do your version control if you can, because things that you don't do are things that are not your fault. Yeah, so we decided to audit everything. Audit everything seems like a great idea. And now we're security maintainers. Worse, we're now library maintainers for all of the things that we found that were wrong that we then fixed and pushed back. So Catalyst was our early MVC framework. That was a kind of good idea. I mean, you know, picking an MVC framework at the time was kind of revolutionary. It was a good thing. Maybe not that one, but you know, who knew at the time. DevOpsDays class was our ORM. Once again, picking an ORM, doing abstraction like that was a great idea. That has continued on. Maybe not that one. And Business Online Payment was actually abstraction layer and framework for doing online payment in Perl. It's still used. I still have modules that I'm technically the maintainer for credit cards and PayPal. So what we found is that our credit card processor and this particular processor, whose name is totally not in that string, was doing it wrong. And anybody who could do DNS spoofing could just take over your payments and just say that they paid or steal credit cards, and that was maybe not cool. So I decided to write my own because that's a totally sensible decision to make when you're writing a registration system. Why don't I write payment systems too? So we decided to do certificate pinning. Because full SSL validation is really, really hard. And I didn't know how to do it. And I knew that there was like way too much to bite off. So instead, what I decided to do is, why don't I just store the SSL certs that I got from all the API endpoints in the library, and then I'll just compare them. And as long as they're the same, well, then we know we're talking to the endpoint, and it's fine, right? Certificate pinning. I mean, this is a thing that is actually in use now in browsers. And this is the reason why they're trying to back that decision out, is now you're responsible for all of those SSL certs, and anytime the endpoint changes, you have to change your library or it mysteriously breaks. Now you're an SSL maintainer. So yeah, I mentioned we couldn't use cookies or JavaScript. So, and I've seen this pattern, once again, many different projects, and it was a thing that seemed totally reasonable at the time, and now I think pretty much everyone acknowledges is terrible. Why don't we build a big object of all of the stuff, serialize it, and stuff it into some sort of variable or a cookie or something, and pass it back to ourselves, and then deserialize it and keep all of our state in there, and then we'll never have to put it in the database. Yeah, beware of code that has this. I wanted to show the code, but it was too big. This is a comment about one small piece of the serializer that just dealt with coupons, not the rest of it, and define it. Like, now I'm a protocol maintainer, a weird protocol that nobody else uses. But if I ever break, everyone's coupons that has ever used this thing breaks. Yeah, so inevitably there are security oopsies. When you're doing a security conference, that's kind of embarrassing, as RSA found out on Friday when they dropped their entire user list. So we really didn't want stuff like that to happen, but nobody schedules bugs for you to make them convenient. No, what happens is somebody who you really respect out in the security community comes to you and said, hey, did you notice this? And you're like, it's 2 days before the conference. Why are you telling me this now? Yeah. So the problem with security bugs is inevitably they cause you to change your design. And code that you previously thought was really nice and clean, environments that you thought were nice and clean, now you have to like munge together in order to deal with this thing that you never accounted for, and now all your code is really ugly. So I like this bug because we found this. I actually found this bug, and I'm not going to display the whole thing. You can go look at it. It's a 10-year-old bug. Who cares? But found this bug because users were essentially mashing that gigantic object, that serialized object, all the time, and it was causing the app to crash. So there's this really cool like bug in Perl, or was really cool back in 10 years ago, that let you unbalanced CGI params, and by doing so, you could sneak SQL injection into your ORM. And you could make the ORM do the SQL injection for you, which I thought was really cool. It meant I had to completely redesign all of my code in order to validate this. And I think the coolest thing about this is this advisory was sent out in 2006. Somebody did an entire talk on this at Black Hat, I think 2 years ago or maybe a year ago, and rediscovered it because nobody cared. So everything old is going to be new again, and all of the things that you found and fixed, somebody else will find and fix 10 years later because nobody's fixed them. Yeah, so template failures. Templates are great. I like templates. Templates were a really good decision at the time. Maybe even now still, but cross-site scripting was starting to become a thing, and then somebody pointed it out in my templates, and I had to go back through all my templates and find all of the places where that was, and then sanify them with this little sane function here, which is actually a macro, which strips out the HTML, except in the places where it can't, which is great. That's fine. You know, hey, I didn't need that time. I can do that. It starts to really suck when you can't read the template because the template is in a language you don't speak and all of it is just Unicode entities. Like that. Because then you can't give the templates to somebody else to fix, and you can't fix them because you don't understand, and you end up having to rebuild the whole things from scratch. So yeah, let's talk about Unicode. So I had to support multiple languages, multiple currencies, languages I did not speak, languages that I had to give templates to and things to be translated to non-technical users who I then expected to edit them in VI and check them into Subversion. If you think doing templates with like weird Unicode characters and Unicode entities is annoying, wait until you deal with lexicons that are in your code, because at least the HTML is something that the non-technical user can display in their browser, and you can kind of work that workflow around to make it work. But when it's in your lexicon, no, you've just got weird Unicode strings that you've got to jam into your source code and hope it doesn't screw everything up. Pick a language with good Unicode support. Perl actually had good Unicode support. It was not a terrible decision. To this day, I still find modern languages have weird corner cases in Unicode that leap out in the dark and stab you in the back. But yeah, VI was definitely not a good decision for Unicode editing. I would also point out, inevitably, a user will have a Unicode name that cannot be displayed by whatever software you're using or some combination, and this will end up being a gigantic bug hunt that sucks. So somewhere along the line, all of us kind of walked off the project in some way or another. We had got jobs, we got lives, we moved cities, that sort of thing. Our DBA left. He didn't have any documentation. He just was like, yeah, I'm too busy. I can't do this anymore. So we got left with this database. It turns out we really needed to have put all of the things in the database also in the version control. I mean, I guess it didn't matter because then we lost the version control, but maybe we should have had all of those things written down somewhere, but we didn't, because we relied on an expert, right? It was his job to run the thing, and that's what he did. And yeah, when he went missing, all of a sudden, we didn't really know what the database was doing anymore. We just knew that it kind of worked sometimes. Going into my ORMs are filled with lies. They do magic, and you're just like, oh, that's a list of tables and nothing else about them, and I don't understand any of the relations. Why is this working the way? And it's because it's referring to a stored procedure that the DBA wrote that is also backed by a materialized view. And you didn't know that. But that said, Postgres is the only technology that we picked in the stack that's still going today in a real way. So it wasn't all bad. Yeah, I'm sure everyone's seen the pattern where somebody builds a queue out of cron and their database. Don't. Not the least of which because it's a total anti-pattern, but also because you will never back up those cron jobs, and somebody will change the machine while you're not there, and the cron jobs will not be there, and then stuff will mysteriously stop working, and no one will know why. I'm ashamed to admit this, but a year ago, somebody came to me and he said, "Why aren't receipts going out anymore?" I'm like, huh, have you looked at any of the cron jobs? Cron jobs, those haven't been running since we changed the box. That was 6 years ago. Huh. Okay then. Yeah, also all of our audit logs were being sent by that, so I guess that didn't happen either. Yeah. Yeah, this is, don't do this. This seemed like a good idea. In my defense, it actually sort of is a good idea. But yeah, it's not. Spot the security vulnerability where we are storing people's credit cards insecurely in total contravention of PCI, which wasn't a thing when I originally wrote this. I'll give you a hint. That's not that random for that key. So lessons learned. Postgres is forever. It's going to work forever. You should pick that. Yeah, another 20 years, be fine. Pick that one for your stack. Audit all things. Yeah, we learned a lot of things by auditing. That was great. That was a total good decision. Just maybe don't maintain them. Get other people to do that part. Yeah, fashion's fickle. The things that I thought were cool, not cool. Not at all cool 20 years later. Nobody actually runs any of the tests, as we found out after they ditched staging. That just wasn't even a thing. First 5 years, yes, people loved tests. After that, nobody cared. And if you write less code, you have to maintain less code, write less code. The less code you write, the less code is your fault, because everything around your code is also code, and that's somebody else's fault, hopefully. Further thoughts? Content and code need two different kinds of version control. This is, I hope, obvious at this point, but it wasn't. Everything needs version control too, so like all of the other things, SQL, schemas, stored procedures, cron jobs, all of it, version control it. If we could version control people, that would be great. And yeah, dependency management is hard. It's going to bite you, no matter what. That is the pain of maintenance, is especially over a long period of time. Is dependencies change in weird, unpredictable ways you could never have known when you first chose them. And your containerization is probably going to do this. So yeah. That is what I have to say about things and how badly I made decisions. Hopefully you can look at your own projects now and think to yourself, am I going to be on this stage in 20 years talking about my poor life choices? Any questions? Was that a hand wave at the back? Yeah, yeah. Yes, I did consider that. Oh, sorry. Did we consider making this easier by just throwing away everything, all the version control, et cetera, and just dropping all the objects in the database? Yes. I didn't even pull that piece of code out to display it because it's super embarrassing. But yes, that was a thing. Yes?
So you're wiser by 20 years and you're saying don't do what I did?
Pretty much.
So if you're talking to somebody who's 20 years younger than you that's about to make the same mistake, how do you actually convince that person? Because it's pretty hard.
Yeah. I don't know how to convince. I mean, all I can say is like, imagine yourself in my shoes having to admit to these things. It's embarrassing. I think people respond to peer pressure and embarrassment.
So in morbid curiosity, what's the current state of the project and the future plan?
Yes, the current state of the project. This took $500,000 worth of revenue this year and ran it and did stuff with it. So like people are making real money with this still. I'm desperately trying to convince people that I should not be maintaining this anymore, not the least of which because I recently got roped back into maintaining it and looked at it and was like, oh God, this is horrible. So I'm trying to convince people to do somebody else's software as a service, registration, CMS, all the things. Essentially migrate the hell off of my code as fast as possible. With the problem with any sort of business like this, with a lot of maintenance code that is running and making money, is there's no real push to do that because it works, kinda. Yes. Oh, we didn't. No, like how did we? Badly is how we did it. People left. They didn't get replaced. That their piece of the project just got forgotten about and left to rot for years. And then other people came on, not knowing that, added their own layer of cruft onto those things, and then they left. And then the project got left for years. And then so on, and so on. I don't have great lessons about how to win with this project. I have lessons about how not to win. Yes. Yeah, because obviously I'm a prophet. I mean, everyone's going to be using Facebook, right? I have no idea. Yeah, Vince. Yeah, this is CanSec West. It's one of the biggest, oldest security conferences in the world. Oh, yes.
In that last one where you say containerization will be likely a maintenance headache, can you dig deeper there? And why do you think that?
Yeah, it comes around to the whole. Why is containerization going to continue to be a maintenance headache? I believe it's because in order to do it right, you either accept one of two things. Either you push off all of your OS maintenance to somebody else, and hopefully they do it right. But the problem is, over a period of decades, that someone else might vanish on you, even if it is an organization. And now you've got this black box that just runs, but you don't understand why. Like, it's the problem of old enterprise software. Or the opposite problem, which is you do all of the work to maintain the containerization. And when you vanish, you leave behind a horrible little black box that nobody understands what's inside it and nobody maintains it. It's not really different than OS maintainership. Like, imagine you picked OpenBSD to do your thing. That might be a bit of a problem for maintenance for you down the road because not very many people use that project anymore, and maybe some of your software requires a lot of porting in order to keep working on OpenBSD. Basically the same idea. That looks like me out of time. So yeah, if you want to grab me afterwards and I can tell you more sob stories about like terrible decisions that I've made, I'm happy to do so.